La viuda Apache grido. La ley sagrada disquedebs casart con las cuatro hermanas. No one spoke loudly. Even the children sensed that this was not a day for questions or play. The man who had died was not just any man. He was known as steady, calm, and fair. He helped others without asking for praise. He knew the old ways but did not force them on anyone. When problems came, people went to him because he listened before speaking. Now he was gone, and the space he left behind felt wide and painful. His wife stood near the fire. She wore dark clothing and kept her eyes low. Her hands trembled slightly, but she did not cry loudly like some others. Her grief was deep and quiet, like water beneath still ground. She had shared many years with her husband. They had worked together, laughed together, and survived hard seasons together. His death had come suddenly, leaving her unprepared and afraid. Around her stood elders, relatives, and neighbors. Some whispered prayers. Others remembered stories about the man's kindness. The elders watched closely, knowing that the funeral was not only about saying goodbye. In old traditions, death often opened doors that the living preferred to keep closed. As the ritual continued, the fire burned lower. One of the oldest elders stepped forward. His hair was white, and his voice was slow but strong. When he spoke, everyone listened, because his words carried the weight of history. He reminded the people of the sacred laws passed down from their ancestors. Laws that were meant to protect families when times were harsh and survival depended on unity. Most of these laws had faded into memory, spoken of but rarely practiced. The modern world had changed many things. Still, the laws remained, waiting quietly. At first, his words were gentle. He spoke of respect for the dead and care for the living. But then his tone changed. The silence grew heavier. The widow lifted her head slightly, sensing that something more was coming. The elder spoke of a law that dealt with loss and responsibility. A law that said when a man died, his family must not be left without protection. According to the old way, the closest relative had a duty to step in and take responsibility, not just for land or goods, but for people. A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Some people shifted uncomfortably, others looked away. They knew what law he was speaking about, even if they hoped it would not be said aloud. The widow's breath grew faster. Her heart beat hard in her chest. She had heard this law before, long ago, as a story told by elders to children. She never believed it would touch her life. Suddenly, the grief she had been holding inside broke free. Her pain, fear, and confusion poured out in a sharp cry. With a voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear, she shouted the words of the law, as if saying them herself could make sense of her world. She said that the sacred law demanded action, that the duty could not be ignored. Her voice echoed through the valley, raw and full of emotion. The people froze. No one had expected her to speak like that, especially not on such a day. Her cry was not made from anger alone. It came from fear of being alone, fear of losing her place, fear of what would happen next. In that moment, she clung to the only thing that felt solid, the ancient law. After her words faded, silence returned, deeper than before. Some elders exchanged looks. Younger members of the community felt confused and uncomfortable. The modern world had taught them different values, but here they stood, facing a rule older than all of them. The man who would soon be named as responsible was not present near the front. He stood among the crowd, feeling his stomach tighten. He had known the dead man well. He respected him deeply, but he never imagined that respect would turn into such a heavy burden. He was a simple man, working hard to earn his living. He believed in kindness and fairness, but also in choice. The idea that an old rule could suddenly decide his future made him feel trapped. His thoughts raced, but his face remained calm. As the elders continued speaking quietly among themselves, the widow slowly sank to her knees. Her strength seemed to leave her body all at once. A woman from the community moved to support her, placing a hand on her shoulder. The fire crackled softly, as if responding to the tension. The sun climbed higher, but the warmth did nothing to ease the cold feeling spreading among the people. The elder finally raised his hand, asking for patience. He said no decision would be made that day. The dead must be honored first. The living would speak later. But everyone knew the law had been awakened and it would not rest easily. The widow was helped to her feet and guided away. Her face showed exhaustion, but also a strange sense of relief. She had spoken the words out loud. Whether they would bring safety or more pain, she did not know. The crowd slowly dispersed. Small groups formed, whispering, questioning, arguing softly. Some said the law should be respected no matter what. Others said times had changed and people should choose their own paths. The man walked away alone. Each step felt heavier than the last. He looked back once, seeing the smoke fade into the sky. He knew that life would not return to normal. Something had begun that could not be undone. That night the valley was quiet again, but sleep did not come easily to many. The widow lay awake, staring into darkness, wondering if she had done the right thing. The man lay awake too, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of a future he had not chosen. The ancient law, silent for generations, had spoken once more, and its echo was only the beginning. The days after the funeral moved slowly, as if time itself was unsure how to continue. The valley returned to its usual sounds, the wind through the trees, the footsteps on dry ground, but something had changed beneath the surface. People spoke in softer voices. Eyes followed movements more closely. Everyone was waiting. The elders met several times in private. They sat in a circle, speaking carefully, choosing each word with care. Some believed the old law must be followed exactly as it had been passed down. Others felt uneasy, knowing the world outside the valley was different now. Still, no one denied that the law existed. Ignoring it completely felt like turning their backs on their ancestors. The widow stayed inside her home most days. Neighbors brought food and checked on her, but she remained distant. Her grief had settled into a quiet sadness. Sometimes she blamed herself for speaking the words so loudly at the funeral. Other times she felt she had no choice. Fear still followed her, especially at night when the house felt too empty. The four sisters lived together not far from her home. They were known in the community, but rarely as a group. Each one had her own way of living, her own hopes and struggles. Now, they found themselves connected by something none of them had chosen. The oldest sister was calm on the outside. She had always taken responsibility seriously and often acted as a guide for the others. She believed in tradition, but she also believed in fairness. The second sister was strong-willed and direct. She questioned rules and did not hide her opinions. The third sister was quiet and thoughtful, often watching more than speaking. The youngest sister was still finding her place in the world, carrying dreams she had never spoken aloud. When word spread that the elders had chosen the man to carry the responsibility of the law, reactions were mixed. Some nodded, saying it made sense. Others shook their heads, worried about what it would mean for everyone involved. The man heard the decision from an elder who came to his home. The message was delivered respectfully, but the weight of it felt heavy. He listened without interrupting, his hands resting on his knees. When the elder finished speaking, there was a long silence. He finally asked one simple question: did he have a choice? The elder did not answer right away. His eyes showed sadness and understanding. He said the law spoke of duty, not desire. But he also said the elders would listen if concerns were raised. That was all he could promise. After the elder left, the man sat alone. His thoughts were restless. He remembered his own life plans, simple but important to him. He had imagined a future shaped by his own decisions, not by an ancient rule. Respect for tradition had always guided him, but now tradition felt like a wall closing in. The next day he was asked to meet the sisters. The meeting took place in a shared open space, with elders nearby but not directly involved. The air felt tense. No one knew where to begin. The oldest sister spoke first. Her voice was steady. She said they did not blame him. They knew the law was not his creation. She said they wanted honesty, not silence. The second sister crossed her arms and spoke sharply. She said tradition should not decide people's lives. She asked him directly if he wanted this responsibility or if he felt forced. The man answered truthfully. He said he felt confused and unprepared. He said he respected them and the law, but he was afraid of causing harm by following something without understanding its meaning in today's world. The third sister spoke softly. She said fear was shared by all of them. She said none of them had expected their lives to change so suddenly. Her words brought a moment of calm. The youngest sister said nothing. She kept her eyes down, listening carefully, holding her thoughts inside. The meeting ended without decisions. That uncertainty made the days harder. The community watched closely, as if waiting for something to break. Whispers grew louder. Some people said the man should accept the duty without question. Others said forcing the law would create pain that could last generations. Families argued quietly at night. Old stories were told again, each one adding fuel to the discussion. The widow noticed the change. She saw the looks, heard the whispers. Guilt returned, heavier than before. She wondered if her cry had reopened wounds that should have stayed closed. She began to question the law she had held onto in her fear. One evening she asked to speak with the man. They met in a simple place away from others. She apologized for the burden her words had placed on him. Her voice shook, but her eyes were sincere. The man told her he did not blame her. He said grief makes people reach for anything that feels solid. He admitted his fear and confusion. For the first time, both felt less alone. As the moon rose that night, the community stood at a crossroads. No one knew which path would be chosen. Tradition stood on one side, strong and unyielding. Change stood on the other, uncertain but hopeful. The man returned home knowing that soon he would have to speak, not just for himself, but for many others who felt trapped between the past and the present. The law had named him, but his heart demanded answers. Sleep again came slowly, and as before, the valley remained quiet, holding its breath, waiting for what the next day would bring. The days that followed felt longer than usual, as if each sunrise brought more questions instead of answers. Life in the valley continued on the surface. People went to work, animals were fed, and meals were cooked. But inside many hearts there was unrest. Everyone felt that something important was being tested, not just a law, but the meaning of living together as a community. The man found himself thinking more about the four sisters than about the law itself. Before all this, he had known them only in passing. Now, their lives were tied to his in a way that felt heavy and strange. He decided that if he was expected to carry responsibility, he needed to understand them as people, not as names spoken in meetings. He began with the oldest sister. She spent much of her time helping others, often caring for children or guiding younger women. When he spoke with her, she listened carefully, her eyes steady and thoughtful. She explained that she had grown up hearing stories of the old laws. To her, tradition was not a chain, but a guide meant to keep people safe. Still, she admitted that times had changed. She said she feared being responsible for her sisters while also losing control over her own life. The second sister was different. She spoke openly, sometimes sharply, but always honestly. She told him she had never trusted rules made long ago by people who could not see the future. She believed people should choose their own paths. Her anger was not toward him, but toward a system that expected silence and obedience. She said she would not accept a life built only on duty. The third sister was quiet and gentle. When she spoke, her words were few but meaningful. She shared that she often felt invisible, both in her family and in the community. This situation scared her, but it also forced her to speak, something she had rarely done before. She said she wanted peace more than anything, not just for herself, but for everyone involved. The youngest sister took the longest to open up. At first, she avoided long conversations, staying close to her sisters. But one evening, she finally spoke. She admitted that she had dreams of seeing more of the world beyond the valley. She feared that the law would close every door before she even had the chance to knock. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. Listening to them changed the man. He realized the law spoke of protection, but it did not speak of feelings, dreams, or fear. Those things had to be carried by people, not rules. At the same time, the elders continued to debate. Meetings grew longer and more intense. Some elders argued that questioning the law would weaken the community's identity. Others believed that holding onto the past without understanding the present would cause harm. No one wanted to be the one responsible for breaking a sacred tradition. The widow watched all of this quietly. Her grief had softened into reflection. She began to see how her words had set many lives in motion. One afternoon, she visited the sisters. She did not come as someone demanding tradition, but as someone seeking forgiveness and understanding. She told them about her fear after losing her husband. She spoke of nights filled with silence and uncertainty. She admitted that her cry at the funeral came from desperation, not strength. The sisters listened. Some nodded, some looked away, but the tension between them eased, even if only a little. The community noticed these changes. Conversations became less angry and more thoughtful. People began to speak about what the law truly meant, not just what it said. Parents talked to their children about choice and responsibility. For the first time, the law was not just remembered but examined. One evening, the man stood alone outside his home, watching the sky darken. He felt the weight of expectation pressing on him, but he also felt something new, clarity. He understood that staying silent would allow others to decide for him and for the sisters. He knew he had to speak, even if his words were uncomfortable. He asked the elders for a chance to address the community. The request surprised many, but it was granted. The gathering took place in the open under the wide sky. People came from all around, curious and tense. When the man spoke, his voice was calm but firm. He said he respected the ancestors and the laws they left behind. He said he understood the need for unity and care. But he also spoke about the sisters as individuals, about their fears and hopes. He asked whether a law meant to protect could still do so if it caused pain. Silence followed his words, not the heavy silence of fear, but a thoughtful one. People looked at each other, considering things they had never said out loud before. The elders did not respond immediately. They said the matter required reflection, but something had shifted. The law no longer stood alone. It stood among real lives, real voices, and real choices. As night fell, the valley felt different. The path ahead was still unclear, but it no longer felt forced. Change had begun, quietly and carefully. And everyone knew that whatever came next would shape their future in ways the old stories had never imagined. The days passed slowly after the man spoke to the community. The valley seemed the same at first, wind rustling through the trees, the river moving steadily, the mountains standing quiet. But under that calm surface, everything was shifting. People talked more openly now, quietly questioning what tradition really meant. The law that had once seemed absolute now seemed heavy, and its weight pressed on everyone differently. The man spent much of his time thinking about the sisters. Each of them had shared pieces of their lives, their fears, and their hopes. But the more he learned, the more he realized that simply following the law could hurt those he cared about. He began to understand that a decision was needed, one that balanced respect for the past with care for the present. The oldest sister continued to be a guiding voice for her younger sisters. She met with the man often, sharing her thoughts, but always in a gentle way. She reminded him that tradition was important, but that traditions could also be understood in ways that honored people's feelings. She said that protection did not mean control, and that care did not mean ownership. Her words gave him courage to think differently. The second sister, as always, was honest and direct. She did not hide her frustration with the situation. She told him that the law had made everyone feel trapped, and that forcing obedience would only bring resentment. She believed strongly that the sisters should have a voice in decisions about their own lives. Her honesty was difficult to hear, but he realized it was necessary. The third sister's quiet wisdom became clearer every day. She spoke less often, but her insights were meaningful. She reminded the man that fear could guide decisions as much as love. If choices were made out of fear, no one would be happy. She suggested that the law should be examined, not followed blindly. The youngest sister began to speak more often as she saw the adults around her listening. She shared her dreams of travel, of seeing new places, of learning about the world beyond the valley. She admitted her fear that the law could close those doors. Hearing her speak made the man understand that his responsibility was not just about tradition, it was about people, their dreams, and their freedom. Meanwhile, the elders continued their discussions. They met daily, sometimes for hours in private rooms and under open skies. Some felt that questioning the law was disrespectful. Others argued that the law had always been meant to protect people, not harm them. These meetings were tense, filled with long silences and careful words. One afternoon, the man asked for a meeting with all four sisters together. They sat in a quiet room, sunlight falling softly through the windows. He explained that he wanted to find a solution that honored both tradition and personal freedom. Each sister listened, their expressions reflecting hope, concern, and a little fear. He proposed that instead of blindly following the law, they would consider its purpose, care, respect, and protection. He asked the sisters how they wanted to be involved in the decision. For the first time, the conversation was not about duty alone. It was about choice, understanding, and partnership. The oldest sister spoke first, saying that she wanted everyone to feel safe. She believed the law could still have meaning if it was adapted with care. The second sister said that respect should not come at the cost of freedom. She suggested that they find a solution that everyone agreed on, instead of following a rule that might hurt people. The third sister emphasized thoughtfulness and patience. She reminded them all that rushing could bring mistakes. The youngest sister spoke about her dreams and her fear of losing them. Together, their voices painted a picture of what life could be if people listened to one another. Word of this meeting reached the elders. They were cautious but curious. One by one, they met with the man and the sisters, listening to their ideas and concerns. Some elders were skeptical, worried that breaking tradition would upset the community. Others saw hope in what they heard, that the law could evolve without losing its meaning. The widow watched these meetings quietly. She felt both relief and worry. Relief because her cry at the funeral had opened a conversation, and worry because change could bring conflict. She realized that her fear had caused her words, but her words had also sparked something necessary. One day, the community gathered for a discussion that would decide the next steps. People of all ages came to listen and share their thoughts. The man spoke first, explaining the sisters' perspectives and his own understanding. He emphasized that respect for tradition was important, but so was care for real people and their lives. The oldest sister spoke clearly and calmly. She explained that honoring the law did not have to mean ignoring feelings or choices. The second sister spoke with courage, saying that the community could respect tradition while giving people freedom. The third sister reminded everyone to think carefully before acting. The youngest sister shared her dreams, showing that even the youngest voices had value. The elders listened quietly. Some faces showed surprise, others concern. But gradually, nods appeared. They realized that a law meant to protect could still serve its purpose if it was understood with care and compassion. The community began to see that tradition was not a chain, but a guide, a living thing that could grow with time. That evening, as the sun set over the valley, the man walked home with the sisters. For the first time, there was laughter in their conversation, soft but genuine. They spoke about the future, about choices, about the possibility of living with both respect for the past and hope for what was to come. The valley was quiet under the stars, but the people inside it felt lighter. The law had been questioned, explored, and understood in a new way. Fear still existed, but hope had begun to grow alongside it. And in that quiet night, everyone understood that sometimes courage was not in following rules blindly, but in listening, understanding, and acting with care. This was a turning point. Tradition remained, but it had found new meaning. People's voices, hopes, and dreams were no longer silent. And the community, once tense and uncertain, began to move toward a future where respect and freedom could exist together. The days turned into weeks, and the valley began to settle into a rhythm of careful reflection. The discussions about tradition and choice had not ended, but they had opened a door that could not be closed. People moved through their daily lives differently now, speaking more kindly to one another, listening more deeply, and thinking about the impact of their words and actions. The man felt the weight of his responsibility less heavily now. He had learned that responsibility did not mean control or ownership. It meant understanding, caring, and being present for others when needed. He spent time with the sisters, talking, laughing, and listening. Each conversation gave him new insight, and he realized that the law, once rigid and frightening, could become a tool for support rather than a source of fear. The oldest sister continued to guide her younger siblings. She helped them navigate the changes that were happening, reminding them that tradition could be honored in ways that respected their feelings. She also encouraged them to speak their minds and express their hopes, reinforcing the idea that their voices mattered. The second sister became more confident in asserting her thoughts. She spoke to the community during gatherings, explaining that respecting tradition did not mean giving up personal freedom. She showed that questioning rules could be a sign of care, not disrespect. Her words resonated with many, especially younger members of the community who had felt their voices were often ignored. The third sister remained thoughtful and quiet, but her presence carried strength. She often mediated when disagreements arose, reminding people to consider feelings and motivations before making decisions. Her calm approach helped prevent conflicts and encouraged cooperation. The youngest sister embraced her dreams with courage. She began to plan trips beyond the valley, small at first, visiting neighboring towns and learning about the world beyond. The community watched her grow with a mixture of pride and curiosity, realizing that the younger generation could carry both respect for tradition and a vision for the future. The elders, initially hesitant and cautious, gradually accepted the changes. They saw that the law could remain sacred while adapting to modern realities. Some elders admitted that they had feared losing control, but now they understood that true leadership was about listening and guiding, not commanding blindly. They began to share stories of past generations, not as rigid rules, but as lessons that could be interpreted with wisdom and compassion. The widow, who had sparked the initial conversation, felt a sense of relief and peace. She saw the sisters growing stronger, the man embracing his role with care, and the community learning to balance tradition with freedom. Her grief was still present, but it had transformed into a quiet strength. She realized that her cry had been a beginning, not an ending, and that her voice had helped the community grow. Community gatherings became more open and inclusive. Meetings about important matters were no longer just about rules but about understanding. People of all ages were encouraged to speak, to ask questions, and to express concerns. The elders guided the discussions, but they also listened, learning from the younger generation and from those who had previously felt powerless. The man and the sisters worked together to create small acts of care within the community. They helped families in need, supported education for children, and organized activities that brought people together. Their actions showed that responsibility could be shared, and that caring for one another was more important than strictly following rules. One evening, the community gathered around a fire to share stories. People spoke of their fears, their hopes, and the lessons they had learned. The man told the story of the law and how it had been understood in a new way. The sisters spoke of their journeys, their dreams, and how they had found strength in one another. The elders spoke of the importance of listening and adapting, reminding everyone that traditions were living things that could grow and change. The valley, once tense and uncertain, now felt alive with possibility. The wind through the trees carried a sense of hope. Children laughed and played freely, knowing that their voices mattered. Adults worked together, balancing respect for tradition with care for the individual. And the man, once weighed down by fear, now felt a quiet joy in his role, knowing that he was part of something larger than himself, something that honored both the past and the future. The law remained, but its meaning had evolved. It was no longer a strict rule that demanded obedience. Instead, it had become a guide for care, respect, and understanding. The community had learned that tradition was not a cage but a framework for love and support. People could honor the past while creating a future that included choice, freedom, and hope. The sisters grew stronger in their roles. The oldest sister became a respected mentor. The second sister became a voice of courage and honesty. The third sister continued to offer wisdom and calm in difficult moments. The youngest sister explored the world beyond the valley, returning with stories, ideas, and experiences that enriched everyone's understanding. The widow found peace in knowing that her cry had not been in vain. She had sparked a conversation that allowed the community to grow, to adapt, and to care more deeply for one another. Her grief had transformed into purpose, and she felt connected to the lives around her in a way she had never imagined. The man, the sisters, and the community discovered that change was not something to fear. By listening, caring, and acting with understanding, they had created a new way to live together. The law was still sacred, but its true purpose was now clear: to protect, to guide, and to honor the lives of those who carried it. As the sun set over the valley, casting golden light over the mountains and trees, the people felt a sense of unity and hope. They knew that challenges would come, as they always did, but they also knew that by listening to one another, respecting both tradition and choice, and caring for each other, they could face whatever the future held. In the quiet of that evening, the valley seemed to breathe with life. The fireflies danced, the wind whispered through the leaves, and the people felt a connection that went beyond rules or laws. They had discovered something greater, that true honor and responsibility came not from obedience alone, but from understanding, compassion, and the courage to choose wisely. The community had changed forever, and in that change they found hope. The law was still there, but now it carried meaning that everyone could respect. And as the night settled over the valley, the man, the sisters, the widow, and all the people knew that together, they could honor the past while shaping a future full of possibility, freedom, and care. The valley was no longer only a place of tradition. It had become a place where voices were heard, where choices mattered, and where the sacred could coexist with the needs and dreams of living people. And in that harmony, life continued, richer, fuller, and filled with hope for generations to come.